Y'all ready?
Yeah.
Y'all ready?
Let's do this.
Okay, cool. Hey, everybody.
Hey.
Hey, everybody.
Hey.
So, we are at First Live, powered by Adobe, Remy Rouge, All Black Creatives, and we are here to talk about entrepreneurship, creativity, storytelling, identity, relating to brands, working with brands, and figuring out what all those connections are, what they can be, what they should be, what you guys deem them to be. We're in a gig creator economy, and we really have an opportunity to be at the forefront of a lot of conversations that happen culturally, that happen in communities, and that happen ultimately around the world. So I feel like it's a privilege for us to be able to do the work that we do, to create the things that we create, and to be ultimately the storytellers of the worlds that we live in, the identities that we identify with, and the things that we create, the things that we are moved by. So I'm going to allow you all to introduce yourselves. I appreciate each of you being here. I appreciate all of the work that you do, the ways that you create, and establish voice for yourselves and the folks that you interact with, and especially as you go beyond yourselves and your communities to communicate and work with corporate entities, other clients, and things like that. So I will kick off to my immediate left and allow Yahaya to introduce himself. Just tell us who you are and how we got here.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me, first of all.
Absolutely.
Really grateful to be here. My name is Yahaya Musa, and I'm from New York. I'm a wellness entrepreneur, and really what I try to do is practice yoga, share yoga as much as possible, and everything else, comes right after that. Yeah, that's really my foundation is sharing yoga, practicing yoga, working with, I guess I'm speaking more on the brands today, and working with brands and how to incorporate wellness and being an entrepreneur. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Sophia Yeshi. I'm a freelance illustrator and graphic designer. I'm queer, Black, and South Asian, and I'm from Baltimore, Maryland. I have been freelancing for 3 years now, and my work is super bold, it's colorful, it demands your attention, and I work with clients like Adobe. I've worked with UPS, Comcast, Netflix Films, Spotify, among other clients in similar spaces. And really my goal is to amplify, uplift, and just sort of reflect Black women, women of color in the queer community. So that's what my work is about.
Beautiful.
Amazing. I'm Rashida Zagon. I am a photographer, freelance storyteller. I do some producing here and there, directing. It's all kind of like in the process of like everything I do as a photographer. I like to put a lot of parts of myself, my whole self, in what I do. And so, yeah, storyteller, photographer. I love to create. Yeah.
Awesome. All true things, all facts. And I'm Bri Laboss. As y'all were talking, I realized I didn't even say
That's okay.
who I was and who we got in this conversation and such. Bri Laboss, founder of Remy Rouge, and I find a lot of my creativity dealing with community and culture and making it revolve around the right economics and the right intentions and such. So, yeah, here we are. So it seems like each of us are just speaking about personal story, obviously, personal experience, who we are. There's a lot of personal happenings that, take place that get us to the point of, I do X for Y because Z. Again, how do we get here? What part of your story would you say is the catalyst that gets you to the point that you are determining what you create, how you create it, and what your voice is? And beyond that, how you offer it to others? I had deep eye contact. You said go to you, Rashida.
Yeah, well, since I didn't share where I'm from, I'm originally from Antigua. I grew up there till I was 8, and I then moved to Portland, Maine. I lived there till I was 19, and then I moved to New York. And so something I've realized through me living life and like seeing my story and also like telling my story, almost like every time I meet someone, when they ask me where I'm from, it's not just one place. And so realizing that like that has a huge impact on why I create, and the things I want to work on and how I create, and also like my search for a sense of home and self, as I kind of like navigate this life. I hope I'm answering the question, but saying all that to say that like my drive and the reason I create is like almost innate. I see everything as like very beautiful. I see people really beautifully, and I always want to create space for people to see themselves as I see them, but also for them to show me who they are. And so just to like create that space, even if like, I don't know, like I don't have to like the person, but I can always like see goodness. And so like I think that's a part of my mission, is like telling stories, like true stories that's happening in real time, or in the past, or retelling a story. And for me, where I'm kind of like guiding into or moving into is telling my story. I think because along my journey, I've just been working so hard to get here that like I was like, do I even like, what's my story? Like, what's my why? Like, do people know me for real? You know, like, you know, and so in me wanting people to tell me their stories, I'm like, who are you? What's my story? Yeah. So yeah, I hope that answers.
It's an answer. It's beautiful. No, you answered it for sure. Yeah. Is there a component of that like determines how you interact with your clients? And
yeah, I think just because I've been in so many different places and interacted with so many different people that like I'm like growing up in Maine. Like Maine is a white state, so I don't know. I just grew up meeting so many different people that like and also my home, like my parents are very like free spirits, and so because of the country I'm from, Antigua, like it's just like loud and fun and everyone's always dancing and moving and talking to each other and just you know, lamenting on stories and this and that. So as I work, I think it's easy for me to connect with people, and it's enjoyable. So I'm just like, I just allow, right? Like I'm in my work, I just want to allow space for people to tell me who they are so that I can kind of interpret it in a way that I also see it, because I'm an artist at the end of the day. And so that's just like how I see things.
Nice.
Yeah, and how I want to create.
I want to do what I want to do.
Yeah.
How about you, Sophia?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, for sure. So what part of your story would you say was like the turning point or the catalyst to just determining like what you create and how you create for or with others?
Yeah. So I feel like the most memorable moment is when I discovered graphic design. So I was 12 years old. I was pretty much an only child. I spent a lot of time at home on the computer, and I was on this website, Neopets, and that's when I found Adobe Photoshop. And at this time, you had to buy Photoshop trials, so I just had to you had to sign up for free Photoshop trials, so I kept making new emails. But
You were on the game early.
Yeah, you know. So at that time, I really discovered, graphic design as a career. Granted, I had always been interested in art and art museums as a kid, but I didn't really know what to do with it, and I didn't have any examples of artists. I didn't know any artists personally. My family has a lot of entrepreneurs, and so my grandfather owned a book business, my grandmother owned a store, and I spent a lot of time around them and in their stores. But graphic design, being a career was like kind of an abstract concept, especially for, my family. But from that point, I decided like that was what I was going to pursue. And the other integral moment, well, with that as well, the high school that I went to was considered a magnet school. So I learned all of the software, Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign in high school. We had a printing press in our high school. And I always knew like, from that moment, like that was my trajectory. I never wavered. I never considered anything else. And then in college, I discovered illustration, and I started to see more women, particularly Black women, kind of finding success in illustration, making a career off it, being able to work with brands. And I think that's when I also realized, like, oh, this is something I can explore because I can tell stories. And I think a large part of why I went into this industry is because I really didn't see myself represented much growing up in media and in, a lot of different places. I just didn't see reflections of me or people who looked like me. And so, from early on, I really just wanted to create work that, like you, Rashida, connected with people and that made people feel celebrated and uplifted and beautiful and just the joy in people. And I felt okay with it being very specific and having, from my viewpoint, because I think that there are so many different artists or people who tell lens through their specific stories that it's okay for me to tell it through mine. I don't have to appeal to everybody. And I think that's part of why I have been able to create the work that I've created, because I've had a viewpoint, right? I haven't said, oh, I'm going to appeal to everyone. I've been very specific and niche from the very beginning. And I knew exactly what kind of work I wanted to do, who I wanted to work with. So yeah, long-winded answer, but
Perfectly winded.
You dropped the gem right.
thank you.
It was beautiful.
Yeah, that makes sense. You wanted to, it's almost like you need to kind of know yourself enough to be able to be like, okay, I'm ready to hop in the pool and work and like swim with whoever I want to swim with. How about you, Seth?
Right. No, I mean, just listening to both of you is like the common denominator is like wanting to connect and share what you're doing and give people the space to, feel alive in a sense.
Wow.
So that
The yoga.
I think that always tends to be like the catalyst for anyone who's driven up with what they do is seeing what it's done for you and wanting to share that and create that space for others to feel the same thing, right? So that's loved hearing that. But catalyst for me was, I started out playing soccer. That was my first passion, my first love, if you will. The first thing that really taught me what it is to commit to something and stick with it. And towards the end of my soccer playing days, my mind, my body, just everything was shot, right? I was at a place where I was really questioning, like, just life, like what was worth anything to me, really. And happened to stumble upon a yoga class. Like, really, I feel like it's a very similar story you hear most yogis say, is you just stumble into a yoga class. And the effects, how I felt afterwards, was everything I needed, coming from so much stress from playing soccer for so many years and not taking care of my mental or my physical, at least not to the level of where I was playing. So catalyst was definitely that transition period from soccer to then towards the end of my career, finding something that gave me what I'd been missing my whole life, in a sense, a way to regenerate my mind, my body, not just to heal it, but to get to a space where I could build essentially my life the way I want it to be. So once it gave me that, after a year or 2 or 3 of devoting to yoga and seeing what it did for me, I think inevitably, whenever you find something you love and you experience what it's doing for you, you want to share it. I think it just leads you to there. So I reached a point where I wanted to share it. Got my did like the whole teacher yoga teaching thing. First, you start teaching to your friends, your family, right? They're like
It's like an MLM.
right. It's like a what?
MLM. You start
What's that?
inviting people. Oh, like a pyramid scheme. I'm just a joke.
Okay, no,
You start inviting people over. You're like, do you want to do some yoga?
Check this out. It's a new thing I got. But yeah, that's it. The people close to you are always the one to experience whatever it is you're going through, right? Good or bad. So started sharing with them, but then eventually larger community, yoga studio, working with brands to teach on their platforms, things like that. And yeah, that's my catalyst is to get everyone to do yoga.
Yeah. Well, I definitely want to do yoga right now.
I need to do it more. Been off for a couple
It's necessary.
weeks.
Very
I
useful.
love that what you said of like, if you love something, you want to share it.
Right.
It's kind of like if you love something, let it go. It's like you
Let it-
want
yeah.
to share it, and
Right.
then it starts with the people closest to you, because your loved ones, those are the ones you share what you love with, right? And like you enjoy life with them, and then they support you, and then so like your circle just gets bigger and bigger because you're like just sharing your
Giving
love
more
and more and more,
Right.
and it's just your love, like it's the thing that you love, and those things change and grow and multiply. But yeah, love that.
Thank you.
Word. Okay. I'm going to come back to you.
Okay.
You're on a roll,
Take
so
it.
I'm going to keep your momentum going. How do you uphold the integrity of who you are, who you identify as, when you're establishing yourself as a brand, as Musa Yoga, when you decide this is, the intention that I'm putting behind my practice and my offerings and such? How do you just uphold the truth to yourself?
I think yoga, like any discipline or any science, has its foundation, things that are there to guide you through the process, right? So a huge way that helps me stay true is revisiting those guidelines frequently and applying it to my practice every day. By doing that, if a brand shows up or any opportunity really,
That's really how it is.
if I have the opportunity to work with a brand, because that is my foundation, it's where I build off with conversation or any opportunity that happens to come my way. It's something that, because it's practiced every day, it's almost a red flag if I don't, to myself, if I don't stick to it. It's like, no, this isn't me. This isn't what I have to offer, or what So I think does that answer the question?
Yeah, that is. Why is everybody so concerned
Just,
about
want to make sure it's being addressed.
This is what we do. We have to make sure that we
got it.
No, try again.
That was exactly it. I love that you say show, because that is how it happens. We're our own human selves in this world that practice what we practice, love what we love, offer it, and a brand shows up and is like, we want to work with you, but what are you asking to work with you? What do you know of me? What do you really like asking of me, and what do you think is me? So yeah, that's why I giggled when it showed up, because it feels like that intrusion sometimes, where you then have to business-wise consider like, well, who am I, and what is the integrity, like what is this project, and why am I taking it, and what is it for? So
that's a great point right there. I think another thing that will keep you true is making a few mistakes.
you gotta learn it.
Yeah,
you gotta know who you really are. You gotta know, dang, that wasn't me
at all.
I don't
but we already here.
Right,
So
right.
so that happens. But yeah, I'll pose the question to both of you, whoever wants to go first.
I think for me it's about knowing my why and knowing my purpose and my values, and I try to always keep those in mind And also because the medium that I create in, it is about feedback. It's not just me speaking to, in a vacuum. It is about the response. Mm-hmm. So I always think about the community that I'm creating for as well. Mm-hmm. How does this impact them? Mm-hmm. And so when I take on a new project, when a brand reaches out to me, I think about, a couple of things. Is this something I'm interested in? Mm-hmm. Do I align with the brand? Mm-hmm. Do I feel like this project speaks to me? And, do I have a perspective that I feel like is valuable, like to add to the conversation? Mm-hmm. But then also, how will people receive this? And unfortunately, as a commercial artist, you really want to be discerning. But at the end of the day, I had to realize, like, I'm working with brands. They all have things that they've done that aren't great, And once you start to have this sort of like barometer, well, I'm not going to work with this brand, but I'll work with that brand. It gets really tricky. And so I just had to accept at a certain point that there's no perfect company out there, right? Mm-hmm. Everyone has their dirt or whatever, but ultimately I just have to make sure that I feel okay about it, even if there is some type of criticism. Because I've gotten to the point now, like some larger brands where they'll post things and I've gotten negative comments, hateful things, and like first it affected me, and then I was just like, they're not even my audience anyway. Why do I care? But when my audience responds negatively, that's when I have to say, okay, is this really how I want to show up, right? And so I always think about, what does it say about me? Mm-hmm. But I also think that it's unfortunate that we have this expectation, though, especially as, like artists of color, that we have to always create work that does align with our values, because ultimately sometimes, like, I feel like you want to take a project because, it pays well, right? And I do think it's important to have values, but I also think that it's okay to take a project that pays well so that you can maybe work with another brand that doesn't have as much money, right? Mm-hmm. So these are all conversations. I think it's very nuanced. It's hard to just say, this is just my one measurement, right? Yeah. So I think about all these things, and I think it changes. When I first started out, I had a different way of viewing it and viewing myself. But I think as I grow in my career, I just always want to make sure whatever it is that I do, that it represents me and who I am.
Awesome. Rashida.
Is it my turn? Could you ask the question again?
Okay.
Please.
How do you uphold the integrity of yourself and how you identify when it comes to working with and establishing yourself as a brand?
Yeah. Agreed. Being myself. I think that's just like my base. I've realized, and I kind of had to step back and listen to how people talk about me and my work to realize what my integrity was. Because I think I operate so like naturally that I don't think about it. So I've realized that how I uphold how I work and who I work with and how I approach and receive and work with brands and people is simply by just like knowing who I am and what I can like handle at the time. I always want to give my best self with whatever and whomever I'm creating with. I would say like I can create with almost anyone. I just enjoy the process of like seeing, getting to know, and like coming up with ideas. I believe that I can capture anyone and make them see themselves beautifully. And so because of that, my whole, like, how I continue that is by, like, making sure that there is some form of a relationship, talking to brands, talking to people. As a photographer, it's just like I just get so many different types of jobs. So I can't, like, I can be picky, and I'm getting to the point where I'm being more picky, but that's more so because of, like, my time. And because, you know, I want my work to continue to grow and like look extra nice and like look more professional, and I care more, right? So like because I care more, I'm putting a lot more time into like editing or discussing with my client what they're looking for. And so if it doesn't, I feel like I'm rambling, but if it doesn't align, then I'll pass it on. Like, I really don't mind. I've been passing on a lot of jobs lately, if whether I'm just not available or I'm just like, this isn't something that I feel like I can even connect to right now. And so it's just being honest with yourself constantly, showing up for yourself and knowing that, like, or for me, showing up for myself, and knowing that if I'm showing up for myself, or in order for me to show up for people, whomever I'm working with, I have to show up for myself and I have to know where I'm at, in order to do a great job. And that is my integrity. Like, I cannot stand when I don't do good work, and I know when I don't do good work. And that often happens if I'm not resting, or if I'm like rushing work. I don't take jobs if I have to rush now. Like, I don't want to.
I got the last one.
You know, you did.
Sorry.
It was good. I mean, I love the rushing and I can create on the spot, but sometimes it's like, I want time, right?
Yeah.
Like, and as a Black woman, as a woman, as just a person who like lives in this world where we're always rushing, I think it's easy to lose yourself. And so, like, my upholding of integrity is like, I don't want to lose myself.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
I think there's something so beautiful about what you said, because I think there's such a power in saying no, honestly, and getting to the point where you can say no. Because it doesn't align. Everybody doesn't have that privilege. When you're just starting out,
That is true.
you might have to say yes to some stuff you do not want to do. But eventually you get to the point where you're like, nope, this isn't where I want to be. And I think, you know, it's great that you've gotten to that point. And it just like more and more the projects will start to align.
Thank you.
Then they really start to distinguish themselves as yours.
Yes.
Because you didn't do the other things and they became other people's.
And and also it's like give other people
Right.
opportunities to connect with what they
pass work on.
Yeah.
you know.
Am I slinging a left and right? Okay, I appreciate that comment, because that was exactly what I was gonna mention and bring up. As well as it's like, it's also just like in this moment, presently, who am I? Where am I? Make a decision. You know, that's beautiful to be able to get to that space. Okay, so we have to talk about content. Okay.
Everything is content.
Exactly. Content. But ultimately, it's storytelling. You know, if you approach it in that light, with that lens. What is your personal preference of content that you create around yourself and your own work? And then how do you translate that to client work? You want to move over? All right, Sophia, you're up.
So I think when it comes to content, I do the best when I can just be myself and be authentic. I do not want to sell you stuff. I do not want to have to market things in a way that doesn't feel natural to me. For example, I designed a line of hair care products called Next of Us. And sold at Walmart. And I also, after I designed the products, I'm an ambassador for them. And I basically told them, like, look, I would love to work with you all, but like, I'm not a girl who spends a lot of time on her hair. I do my hair, it does the job, I move on, you know, with my day. It's not something that is super, super important to me. But the things that I really connected with is like kind of being able to tell a story and to talk about how my hair and how using their products and learning more about my hair has empowered me to feel more confident in myself, or how it inspires me to experiment more, right, with my style, things like that. So when I can speak from a very real place, I feel more connected to the content. And when it already touches on, you know, things that I would naturally buy or support or promote anyway, I feel a lot more aligned with it. And it's the same thing with working with a brand. If it's something where I already feel like I have a point of view in that space, then I'm more likely to, I feel like, do my best work, and it will connect with people better because you're coming from an authentic place. Was there another part of the question?
No, you addressed it. Well,
Okay.
client work and just what your personal preference of content is to create around yourself, or
Like social
your own
media
work.
or like...
Everything
Anything?
is content.
Everything is content.
Yeah, I think my preference, and I really want to get back to this, is creating from my personal feelings. When I, like in 2020, pandemic lockdown, I was channeling a lot of my emotions and feelings into my work, and I found that a lot of people really connected with it. Done that a lot less, but I know that I need to continue doing it. I also think as artists, it's just important to continue personal projects anyway. It's how you're able to show how you've changed, the direction you want to move into. And so I know that I have to keep going with personal projects, and I think it's a great opportunity for me to show how I've grown, but also still to use it as an outlet to express my creativity.
Yep. Nice.
Yeah, I think authenticity is huge. Like you said, I think that's what you started with. That's a huge
Keep
part.
talking.
Yeah, okay. I'll keep talking. Yeah, I would totally agree with that and build off of that with authenticity. It's got to be something that's almost there's got to be an effortlessness to what you're creating. It has to be something you enjoy doing, and yeah, authentic. Because I truly believe we all have like this radar built in us to see something authentic. Whether we listen to it or not is a totally different conversation, but I think people can see what's real, and as a creator or whatever it is that you're trying to share, when it comes from a truly honest place, I think it's received much better. So just sticking to whatever is true to you when you're creating, I think is really important. Revisiting your intentions, your purpose is really important, and making that come through in your work. I think it's good to make things appealing, visually appealing. I think that's important. We are visual being, like, it's nice to see nice aesthetics, but trying to touch as many senses as possible also when creating, I think, is something that's important. A nice picture, a nice video, but also maybe throwing some words or anything that to just touch as many senses as possible. I think is something to consider when creating.
Yeah. Gem. Sensory things. Gem. Drop it.
Question again, just real quick.
Okay. Let me see. Y'all asked me why I did these note cards.
Exactly.
Because y'all were going to have to ask me each time. I do. Hold on. What is your personal preference of content that you create when it's centered on yourself or just your own work? And then how do you translate that to clients?
Okay. So, translate to clients. I create very randomly and sporadically.
I've seen it.
Like, I honestly, like, sometimes I'm like, I don't know what I'm posting. Like, I do, but it's very, like, it's almost like it's going through on Instagram, it'll be, like, going through my emotions of the day. So, like, I like sharing on my stories kind of authentically and, like, as honest as possible. I think the beautiful thing about the internet is that things pop up that relate to you, and so like sharing that as a part of like content that I will share is it's great. It's meaningful to me, and it kind of like then connects to like what I'm doing. And I also share myself a lot, so like take little cute selfies or whatnot. Yeah, I play the I did play the piano. I share a lot of myself. And I didn't realize that I was sharing a lot of myself until like people would be like, "Oh, you do this," or I'm like, "Oh, yeah." So yeah, sharing myself, but I think it connects to my work. When I capture people, I think, or I'm trying not to use the word I think. So when I share what I share on Instagram, whether it's like a post where it's a photo of someone I took, but like I share a story in the caption, and sometimes the story is like about the person, or it's about what I'm going through, or like whatever it may be. I will tell you, I've not actually really ever planned a post. I think the last 2 weeks when I did some work for CultureCon and Seen in Black, that was the first time I like had to think about
Ever?
Not kinda. I usually no. And the project I did with Cyrus Aaron, it was a recreation of Mo Better Blues. So like we planned that. That was like the most planned post. But like every time whenever I've posted a photo, it's literally just like, oh, I like this photo, and then like I'll throw it up. And I'm like, what am I feeling? And so I'll like start writing, and I just throw it up. Like I don't put too much thought in it, just because I believe that if I'm allowing myself to keep this like open communication with myself, with like the whatever higher being, and with the people around me, if I'm like listening to what I'm telling myself or what I'm saying or the things that's coming into my mind, when I share that, it's authentic, right? And it's real, and it's something that I'm going through in the moment, or I have gone through, or it's something that's speaking to my heart in that time frame. And so a lot of times that connects to people, and it's been nice to witness that, and to have people also just like tell me like, whoa, like that actually really meant something to me. And another way I create is like using reels. So I love videography a lot. But because it's so much work, I just kind of take a lot of videos with my phone. And when I have time, I'll make really cute reels with like random videos, and I'll put music to it. And then that touches on my love for music. And so my content sharing just is me bringing different parts of myself in the content. And then work is work, I go to work and then we basically do the same thing. I want you to show up as you. And I think if people follow me, they see that. And I think I kind of bring that same person in the studio, behind the camera. Yeah.
And scene. Cool. We're a couple more questions, and then I'll let y'all mosey on and continue to be yourselves. But we're living in radical, innovative times in a lot of ways, for a lot of reasons. What are some determining factors for the work that you solicit yourselves or that you accept?
So what are the differences?
What are some deciding factors for those things? Like you said, they show up.
Yeah.
So what do you accept? How do you solicit work? Because there's projects that we want, that we are interested in, working on and actualizing. So what kind of determines that for you guys? And how do you show that, like, this job is yours, this is mine, or it's the one that you want,
Sometimes it's financially, right? Like, this is a decent check, or this is not a huge check, but like I could use the extra money, and I care about what you want me to capture. Yeah, so that's a huge deciding factor. I do a lot of work from my heart. So I take, like, a lot of my clients will just want a shoot for themselves, and I ask, like, what's your budget? And if it aligns with my timeline and whatever, like, I'll do it. So that's a deciding factor. Budgets. A lot of
budgets. People are shy about talking
they're
about
really
budgets.
shy. I encourage.
They ask too late.
Yeah, I encourage. Just tell me what your budget is, and like allow me to make a decision. That's kind of how I go about work that I take on and don't take on. Also, I don't know if it's me, just what I've attracted, but I tend to attract work that I want. It'll be something I'm thinking about, and then it'll just show up.
Manifestation.
Yeah. So like, my friends say I'm like a master manifester.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's because I go into the spaces that I need to go into, or that I'm just like, oh, I want this, give it to me, and then it.
I think it's a combination of you being all of the ways that you're yourself. It just calls the stuff that is yours to you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Received. Thanks. So yeah, that I'm usually very vocal with my clients. Like if they reach out, like I have a conversation about what they want and what they're looking for. It's not likely that I come across someone that I don't want to work with. But there are certain spaces, like if I'm to shoot an event, I need there to be energy in the space. Just because sometimes you can shoot an event, it's like, depending on who's asking, it's like, okay, like if there's, so there's that, it's a lot of different factors, but that's like,
the main
things
that have to make sense.
Yeah, it has to make sense, it has to connect. If it doesn't, no, I'm not interested. Yeah.
You got something?
I do. You got something? I just didn't want to jump in.
Go ahead.
So I think that budget is important. I think budget on the list of factors is probably not always number one. I mean, if you throw in a bag at me, I might consider it a little more than I would something else. But since 2020, I've had an agent for illustration and design. So that's a really great thing because my agent, whenever I get a project, I send it to her. And so she does the negotiating. And that really empowered me because I think a lot of us just do not know how much money can be made. I realized I wanted to work with my agent because the first conversation we had, she threw a number out there that someone else had made on the same project that I had worked on, and I made nowhere near that. And my mouth was on the floor. I was like, you can make that much money in illustration? That's not real. That's not a real number.
Especially illustration.
Yeah, I had no idea, and you really just don't know, especially because brands will ask, oh, well, what's your rate? And you're like, $1,000, sure. But there is so much money to be made out there, and I think that you have to really know your worth. And, your worth it's not tangible, it's based on who you are, what you have to say. Can they go to someone else to get the same thing that you create? And I think the goal is to be the only person that creates the work that you do, right? And so I feel like that's what I have tried to do, is just be very specific, speak from myself, show up authentically at all times. So that's one thing. And then outside of that, I really think I say no a lot, honestly, now. Most projects that I get, I turn down because I don't feel like everything aligns. There was more that I wanted to say.
You come back. You can put him on the hot seat for now.
Yeah, thanks. I had points in my head.
You made a lot of good ones.
Yeah, you so many. As artists, I feel like there's just so much in here.
Yeah, I want to tell you everything.
Yeah.
I care so much.
I gotta ask for you to ask the question again. I'm gonna be that person this time.
What are some determining factors for the work that you solicit, go after, that you accept from other brands? And how do you demonstrate that a job is yours or the opportunity is something that is for you?
If it's something along the lines if it's something that I've already created on my own and it comes my way, then that's kind of a determining factor. A lot of times if I want something, I kind of just do it on my own, right? Let's say I want to start, let's say I would love to teach online yoga classes for a company. I would start by just doing my online classes. So if an opportunity like that comes along, I'm like, this is what I want because I've already done it, actually. So then it's great to be able to get paid from a corporation or whatever. That's one determining factor if it's aligning with something I'm already doing. And budget obviously is huge. It is because it's time, it's energy. I think any professional has been in a spot where you take a job and you're like, dang, I'm putting weeks into this and I'm getting this amount of money. It makes no sense, right? Hindsight, you're always it always feels like you got shorted with money a lot sometimes, especially earlier on before you start saying no. So
I say yes to a lot.
Yeah, you say yes to a lot and you're like, actually, I'd rather have my weekend to myself than be spending it on that, Just learning to weigh what's worth it to you and what's not. What's going to be impactful or not, things like that, mixed in with the financial, of course.
Okay.
You really touched on what I was gonna say, which is create the work that you want to get hired for. And as soon as you said that, I was like, yeah, that was my other thought. Because when I moved to New York, so I was working as a graphic designer full time, like in-house, and all the work I was making was like brochures, flyers, logos. It was like not sexy things, you know? And I really wanted to get work as an illustrator. So I did a lot of party flyers. I was getting paid like $30 for party flyers in Baltimore for events. And I did illustrations for myself or for friends, and I put all of that work on my website because I saw what the companies I wanted to work for, what kind of artists they were hiring, and what kind of work they were commissioning. And so I was like, okay, I want to get hired by these brands. It was like Refinery 29, like brands like that. And within, you know, my first couple months of working here, I got a job, I got hired by Refinery to work on a project. And, you know, within a couple months, I had worked with like a bunch of the brands that were on my list. And I truly believe you have to create the work that you want to get hired for. But I feel like also then as you level up, the problem I'm facing now is I have to keep doing that. And that answers your other question is like, I honestly don't pitch that often. I kind of shoot my shot where I'll speak things into existence and manifest and say, I want to work with this brand, I want to do this, but I don't usually put it together in a really concrete way to say, I want to work with you, this is why you should work with me. And I really want to get better at doing that, not just speaking it, but showing a proof of concept, like you were saying. I think it's really important to do.
That's, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think that's been huge personally with working with brands. For me, is creating the work I want. One example that comes to mind is I did when I first became a dad, I did
You're a dad?
I'm a dad.
Should have led with that.
I'm a new dad, 2 years,
congrats.
almost 2 years. Thank you.
Sorry.
No, you're good. So I think probably before my first Father's Day, I wanted to share something, 3 yoga poses for the first time dad. So I did that, got my boy Ezekiel to shoot some photos. I wrote a blog on it.
Can I shoot you?
And I posted it on my website. And a year later, before the next Father's Day, I got something with a pretty big yoga publication to make a video for dads.
I love that.
So it's like, you know, the first one I did, it was just me offering it, genuine offer. And then the next year I got paid for it.
That's amazing.
There you go.
You know, so that's, I think, creating what it is you want to get hired for. Just do it.
Yeah.
Just do it. You can't go wrong.
Yeah.
Just create it.
Absolutely.
Also, just start telling people you want to do stuff.
Well, yeah,
Speak
that's a
it,
huge
right.
part of it. If you tell people what you're doing or what you want to do, like if you quit your job and you start telling people what you're doing, people are going to support you.
Yep.
Like, it's going to happen.
Right.
You're going to, it'll be fine.
But you also, if you speak it, you calling it too.
Call it.
There you go.
Right.
That's me every time I'm like, oh,
Your
I
voice-
said it. Uh-oh.
Yeah. Oh, shit. Exactly. I was like, oh, God. Actually, yes, I said something yesterday. I was talking to a friend, and then I ended up meeting someone that like aligned with the thing that I want. And I was like, Rashida, stop. She's like, are you ready? But I'm like, yes. I'm ready for whatever it is that I'm calling out. I'm receiving it. I'm showing up. I'm ready to show up. And that's what, for me, like I'm always willing to show up for the things that I want and do the work, right? Like it's doing the projects that you want. It's like if I see a company that I want to work with, and I did this more when I was starting out, but I would reach out to the company and I would be like, hey, could you like maybe send me some products and I'll like shoot some photos or whatever, blah, blah. And then also when I started out, like I was shooting for my family, for friends. I did a wedding, I did this, I did all of these things. I would set up shoots for friends and then I would post it. And the work that I started with felt really authentic, and not saying that my work isn't now. I think for like a year, I just didn't like anything I was doing, but it was because like I was just doing it, right? It was work. And so after going through that, that's why I'm in this stage of like, what do I want to do? Like, I love film. I want to do more directing. I want to do more film work because like my storytelling is getting to the point where like the photos that I'm capturing at events or like on shoots, it's like this long story. And I'm like, Rashida, you have to narrow it down, you know? But like, that's just showing me that the work that I want to create is elevating, and so I have to show up to that, right? Like I have to like take that step up to the next step of what I want to do. And sometimes it feels weird or crazy because you're like, well, I did this like years ago. Like it's like kind of feels like you're starting over on a new thing, but it's like you're not. You're just showing up to the next step.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, can we talk about how hard it is to show up sometimes?
Yeah.
When you are afraid, when you haven't been in that space before.
Yeah.
And I think for me, sometimes I want to self-sabotage too. Like, well, if you don't try that hard, then you don't feel bad if you know it doesn't work out or whatever.
Right.
But it's like, why do that? I think a lot of us, we know what we have to do, but we are our own worst enemy because we get in our head. And we just have to like trust ourselves more and know that even if you've never done it, like you have the capacity to navigate it. And like you said, you can show up. You just have to do it.
You just
Try
have to
do the
do
work.
it. Yeah. And if it doesn't align, like I think something you were saying earlier, or I don't know how long ago we touched on it, but it was, you know, if you try something and it bombs, right? At least you tried it, right? And so the more you try and the more you do, you understand more of what you want to do and what you don't want to do. It's not a loss. It's just that like, oh yeah, I did a wedding and like, I like shooting weddings, but I only want to shoot my friends' weddings. So when people ask me if I want to do, it's like, maybe a friend's, maybe someone close, but like, I'm not a wedding photographer, right? It's like, I've experienced and tried the things. I've been willing to risk it. I've been willing to show up. I've been willing to like open up my heart a little and like whatever that looks like. So it's showing up and just allowing life to unfold. You know, it is what it is. Like, I just don't think it's that complicated. I'm just starting to feel like it's not that complicated.
It's not that hard.
It's not that
thing.
Just like, hey,
Yeah.
if you cry, you cry.
Right.
Yeah.
Being okay with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it just comes back to like, you want to do the work that is truly yourself, and for you to be able to do that, you have to show up as yourself.
As yourself.
Like, boom, uninhibited. We're gonna end.
Just summed up.
I was gonna ask to close out. Are there any words of encouragement for the homies? I feel like this last bit of conversation has been some of that. But
Yeah.
is there
I've just
any
been saying to take a risk, like just try. You know, it doesn't hurt to try. Show up. Like that's really what I've also been telling myself is like show up. If people are bringing you in, if people are communicating with you, if there's an open line of communication, and if you can create that open line of communication, do it. See people and like talk and just be willing to like take the step, because then you can see if you like it or not, and you can move on from there. Yeah.
I think it is like forget the end goal as much as you can and just kind of get lost in the process and enjoy what it is you're creating. Because with that, the end is always good if there is an end, you know. But just getting lost in the process, appreciating the process, I think is huge. It's good for your health, your mental health, to just be in the process, not too worried on the outcome, really, because any favorable outcome is about what you put into the process anyway. So paying attention to the process, being okay with messing up is huge. You have to be okay messing up. And as far as working with brands, explore, play with rates. Don't be scared to say numbers.
That scared shit out of you.
You know, if you're not scared to say the number, you're probably not going high enough. You know
If they're not,
yeah,
exactly.
like, so yeah, just almost make a game out of it, in a sense, especially with rates, or, you know, don't be scared to ask for what you want. You can't be scared to ask for what you want. Yeah, but you also got to know what you want, right?
I would say growth happens from being uncomfortable, and that you have to put yourself in a place of discomfort in order to grow. That can be really scary, and I think that can be the point where a lot of people want to quit because you're not seeing that instant success.
Right.
But as I've heard a lot of successful people talk, a lot of them talk about this point where they were just trying and trying, and they just it wasn't happening. And there's a point where they're just like, oh, I could have just quit and moved back home, but I pushed through, and then maybe it was an actor and they got that one role, you know what I mean? Or maybe, you know, you're a photographer and you got that one job that kind of was a catalyst. And so I feel like we just have to keep believing in ourselves even when we're not getting the external validation, because it shouldn't be about validation.
Right.
It should be about expressing yourself authentically no matter what. But yeah, also don't be afraid to quit. Like, you know, on one hand, right? Quitting can be a great thing, and I think
quitters
like
get a bad name, but
okay, I think
Whenever someone's like, I quit my job, I'm like, great, yes, next.
I think it's an opportunity.
Yeah,
I think
it
there's
is.
so much to be
Open the
learned
door.
in failure, and in rejection. So like, just real quick, I always talk about like when I moved to New York, I thought I was going to get a full-time job as a graphic
Take
designer.
your time, you don't have to be real quick.
Oh, I thought I was going to get a job, and so I applied for jobs for about 8 months, and I had one job interview, and I didn't get the job. That's the only reason I started freelancing. And so I always go back to that moment of like, well, at the time I was so disappointed in myself, you know, because I couldn't get this job that I wanted. But what would have happened if I had a full-time job? I might not have ever started freelancing. I might not have ever found the courage on my own. And so like you said, in losing a job or in getting rejected, you never know what's on the other side of that. So it's kind of like trust the process.
yeah.
I want to add, ask for help. It's okay to ask for help. I'm learning that. It's hard to ask for help because then it's like an extension of you trusting yourself and knowing yourself. But yeah, that would be my like also like takeaways. Like, don't be afraid to ask for help, especially in the community. Like, we are here for each other. And so I make sure my friends know that they can ask for help, but also like, you know, the more you do in your work and the bigger your business becomes, I know that like a lot of my friends have been, like that's what we talk about, how exhausted we are, and like that it's like, ask for help, it's okay. And that's that.
Yeah.
Period.
Period. Yeah. My key takeaways are just the importance of knowing self, practicing being yourself, establishing your own practice around yourself, so that when the Hail Marys or the whatever else is come on, the opportunities come, when they show up, when work comes knocking, or you have the opportunity to work, you know that ultimately that is what is going to be put into it. That's what the ultimate product is going to be. And that's like the artist, the personal side. And I think lastly is like, don't be afraid of the business side. It's a big world out there. There's a lot of numbers, there's a lot of stories, there's a lot of reasons for things, and ultimately the more just grounded in self that you are and in your work and your practice, the more of whatever it is that you end up working on will be yours and for you and because of you and all of that. So thank you guys so much
Thank
for
you.
sharing
That was
yourselves
great.
and your stories with us. Thank you, Adobe Express, Sydney, our community manager. Thank you, Danielle and all Black creatives, Danny and First Live, Yahaya and Bri with Remy. There is going to be another slideshow of some really, the same ones, but beautiful community members and spotlights, some guys doing really beautiful work, really moving the needle, really having conversations that are worthwhile and doing work that is just good. So tap in with them. And there's a link at the end of that slideshow that is for the Adobe Express Ambassador Program. If you are a creator that wants the opportunity to, again, work with a brand, establish a bit more of who you are and what you create and who you create for, it's a great opportunity to just dive into that world, learn a bit more, and just get more familiar and skilled with certain products and such. So thank everybody for tuning in. Thank everybody that is in studio with us, and see you next time. It's a wrap.
Hey.